So you started doing some cow horse events and they are super duper fun, but you keep losing points for things that you don't understand and you're trying to figure out how to get better. This is the video for you, especially if you lose your cow back to the herd, or if you're pulling your horse around and their head is up in the air and they're not reading their cow. These are the mistakes that you're making and that you should be watching out for if you are just starting out in cow horse. The first mistake I'm going to talk about is the fact that you're doing too much. And this really has to do with horses that are like broke to do cow horse. If you bought a trained horse, this typically is people who are getting in their horse's way. This happens a lot. You're doing too much. You see what's happening with the cow and you think you have to take control. When you're working your cow, make sure that you have your hand down and you let your horse do its job. A lot of this can come from some insecurities of not trusting your horse to do its job. So make sure that you're practicing enough that you know how your horse is going to react and you know what your horse can do and all of those things. And when you practice, it's okay to let your horse make mistakes, and it's totally okay to just sit there and see what your horse does in front of a cow so that you can figure it out and you know what your horse is going to do. And here's the truth, is that your horse cannot focus on his cow and do his job if you are handling his face. Every time you touch their face, it takes the horse's attention off of the cow and puts it on you as the rider, and that's going to slow down their reaction time. Leaning into the turns stems from when people are doing too much with their horse or when they're trying to do too much. The horse is not focused on the cow, the horse is being late, so then you feel like you have to lean into those turns and drag them through the turns to stay with the cow. Remember with this, when you're leaning into those turns, say my horse wants to turn to the left to go with its cow, and I'm pulling and see my shoulders here. When I slant that shoulder line and it's not parallel to the ground, when I slant my shoulders and I pull into those turns, that's taking all of my weight and it's putting it into the pocket right in front of their left shoulder. That horse has to now lift up all of my weight to get under me to make that turn. And more often than not, they're not going to lift up your weight. They're going to do like a barrel horse turn around your weight. Then they're going to bump the cow in the ass, and then you're going to be out of position and out of control. So to avoid all of this, and that's when you lose your cow back to the herd. So to avoid all of this, you need to keep your shoulders parallel to the ground. Don't ever do this and then pull into the turn. You want to keep your shoulders parallel, and if you have to use a rein, I even tell some of my riders who have a really bad habit of leaning into the turn to look, lift, and turn. So if you are going through that turn and you are struggling to keep that shoulder up, look in the direction of your cow, lift that shoulder, and then turn with the cow, and that's going to keep you from dipping into that turn. Now, this mistake tends to be with my super noobs, like my super new cow horse people. They underestimate the power of staring a hole into your cow and having your horse focus and know what you're looking at by where your eyes are. Because typically, so the mistake is that they're not looking at their cow. Let's start there. So if you're not looking at your cow, then your horse does not know where you want to go. It goes back to the foundation and basics of riding. When you are first starting to ride your horse, you have to look in the direction that you want to go, and you need to turn your head in the direction that you want to go. And this all relates back to when you turn your head and look, it's going to turn your shoulders and it's going to shift your pelvis, and then it's going to help your horse feel your weight, the change in the weight. And besides that, horses are really good at reading body language. That's what they're made to do. And if you're their leader and you are looking at something, then they know that that's something that they should be paying attention to. And so when you are working your cow, do not look down at your horse. Do not look at what his feet are doing or what his head is doing. You can watch all that with the peripheral of your vision. You need to stare a hole like you are a superhero, and you're gonna drill a hole into that cow's side with your eyeballs. Do not ever lose sight of your cow. And that is really gonna help your horse figure out where he needs to be. And the other side of this are my newbies. They will be late and out of position, and then the cow will come around behind them, and they'll think that it is faster to turn tail, which means turning away from their cow and putting the horse's butt towards the cow to get back up with their cow, because it's like a shorter path of travel by the time they're that far out of position. And that will get you disqualified in some associations, and it will be a very heavy point deduction in others. So do not turn tail. To help you figure out how not to turn tail is you cannot ever take your eyes off your cow. If you keep your eyes locked on your cow and turn your horse in the direction of that cow, you won't turn tail. It's when you are watching your cow, oh, your cow beat you and it's running off this direction, and you're like, well, if I take my eyes off my cow and look this way, then I can just turn this way and go get my cow over here now. That is a big no-no. Keep your eyes glued onto that cow, even if you're late, and turn around and go with it in that direction. All right? So keep your eyes locked on to your cow. Along with keeping your eyes locked onto the cow, a lot of my newbies, if they are keeping their eyes locked on their cow, they are not keeping their horses locked onto the cow. And what I mean by that is, as you're riding around, and I talked about watching your horse out of the peripheral of your vision, you need to make sure that your horse's head is always slightly tipped to its cow. If your horse is going on a straight line across the arena and he's looking at the herd, how is he supposed to see and pay attention to the cow that's in front of him? So use a little bit of that inside rein or cow side rein, and you're going to shorten it just a touch, and just to where your crook, just put a little arc in so that he's watching it, so that his head is tipped towards it, and then he knows what he's supposed to be focused on. Okay, so always, along with yourself, keep your horse's face turned towards the cow that you are working. The next mistake that I see people making with their cow horses and in their cow horse runs is they are not coming to a full stop before they turn to go with their cow. And that turns into kind of like this barrel horse, cow horse hybrid of a turn. And this is a lot more for like the boxing side of things and the cutting side of things, because on those fence turns, when you're going down the fence and you do a fence turn, there is a point in that slide stop on the fence turn where you start to turn before your horse's 4 feet have really planted in the ground. They're like sliding and then you're turning. Okay, so that's the one exception. Everywhere else, and for most non-pros, they're in like a box only class anyways, and so you're not going down the fence, or you're like a box drive box class or something of that effect. You want to make sure that you stop your horse and then you turn. Make sure that if your cow is running down and then, oh shit, your cow stops and turns and you're just like, woo, turning with your cow, stop straight first, then turn with your cow. And it can be something as simple as like, stop, like half a second. It's literally on the colts, it's just like a half a second, all 4 feet stop, now turn. You need to make sure and practice that you come to a full stop and then turn. And the problem is, if you don't come to that full stop and you're making that barrel turn, like we talked about in one of the other mistakes, is when you make that barrel turn, then your horse is out of position coming up behind the cow and bumping them in the ass back to the herd, instead of turning on that straight line and cutting that cow off at the head. You don't want it. All right, your next mistake, or the next mistake that I see people making, is they are not drawing back after they stop. And this kind of plays off of the last mistake that we talked about, when you're not stopping before you turn. That's the first part of correcting your horse and getting them to work off their hind end, is to make sure that they're coming to a complete stop before they turn. Then you need to make sure, like we said before, that they are drawing back after they stop. Some horses are bred to work off of their butt. I am lucky enough to own one of these horses where it was more of a problem for me to train this little horse to get him to go forward than it ever was for me to like teach him to stop and draw back, because he just did it so naturally. But there are a lot of horses out there who are very forward, meaning they want to go forward and they're thinking about going forward, and they're not thinking about sitting on their butt and sitting back and using their hind end. And the way that you do that is every single time you stop that horse, it doesn't matter the situation, every single time, if you want them to get good at using their butt, step them back a couple steps. And then once you get good at stepping back a couple steps, then you want to work on trying to get them to drive backwards without you having to pull on their face, right? So you want them to take a step and then keep that momentum. Take a step and then keep that momentum, and then let them turn. So if we missed what this mistake is, it's not drawing back after the stop. They need to sit and shift that weight onto their booty so they can make a 180-degree turn instead of wrapping around and bending their body. They're gonna keep their body straight. If they're set back on their hind end, they'll keep their body straight, and then they're gonna whip around and be super light on their front end because all of their weight is shifted on their booty. So get really good at teaching your horse every time he stops, back up 2 steps. Every time he stops, back up 2 steps. Once he gets good at that, stop, draw back on his own, okay? And that's gonna help you get ingrained into his mind that he needs to be using his booty. A lot of the mistakes that I've talked about so far have just been mechanics of riding the horse and how the horse moves in the cow work. This one is going to be strategy. So the biggest mistake I see strategy-wise for cow horse people or beginner cow horse people, is that they are not thinking about getting in front of that cow's head and stopping them in front of their head. They're thinking about tracking their cow, and they are trying to keep locked on to their cow and follow their cow. But to really be on the offensive and control the cow and get those control and positioning points in the cow horse, you have to be constantly thinking about cutting off that cow at the head and not chasing it on its butt. And you'll hear, and I even teach this like in my cow horse clinics, that you want to keep your horse's head on your cow's shoulder and you want to stare at the cow's shoulder. That is all very true. If you are just trying to stay with your cow, that's what you want to do. But when you're in the show situation and you're trying to show the judge that you can control that cow and you are the one calling the shots on what's happening in the arena, you have to get in front of his head and cut it off. Then make sure your horse is good enough and broke enough that when you go and cut that cow off, like you're on your straight line, you get in front of that head of the cow, that cow's going to stop and turn and go the other way. So you have to be ready when you cross that cow's eye to stop and turn the other way. So my biggest thing that I have to preach, and I preach this, like people will be doing cow horse for a long time and they still don't get it. And then somewhere along the line, the switch will flip in their mind about it being more of an offensive thing than a defensive. Like when you're watching cutting horses, it looks like they're playing defense. Like it looks like they are just reacting to what the cow is doing. But those really broke-trained, catty cow horses, they're working on the outside of their cow, meaning that cow or that horse is going to be stretching just slightly in front of that cow's nose every time to make it stop and turn, That horse is saying, hey, don't go that way, don't go that way, don't go that way. And that's when that cow starts doing the little dance and that horse is doing the dance with it, because the horse is the one saying, don't go over there, don't go over there, I got you, okay? That's, most people when they see that, they're like, wow, look at the cow saying, I want to go over here, oops, nope, I want to go over here, oops, nope. That's not what's happening. The horse is saying, no, you can't go there, no, you can't go there. And that's when you score the biggest points. Go in front of that cow's head, in front of their eyeball, stop them and turn them. go in front of that cow's eyeball, stop them and turn them. Don't wait for that cow, and this is another big thing that I see along these lines of chasing the butt instead of the head, or chasing that shoulder instead of the head, is don't wait for your cow to decide, oh man, I think I'm beat. You want to make it clear in that cow's brain that they are not to be passing you at all. Like when you're running up to the fence, like if you're on a straight line and the cow's heading across the arena, you need to be getting to that fence before the cow gets there, and then be ready to stop and turn. You need to be getting to the other side before the cow gets there, and then stop and turn. It's not let's go and stay with the shoulder until the cow decides to stop and turn. It's a get in front of that cow's face, stop and turn. Get in front of that cow's face, stop and turn. More aggressive, more aggressive, more offensive, more thoughtful, more control. That's why they call that on the scorecard. That's why it's called control. It's because you are the one, your horse is the one calling the shots on that cow. So do not be the one that's chasing the butt. Do not be the one that's just staying in time with the shoulder. Be the one that goes to the head and says, you don't go this direction. You don't go that direction. You stay here. That's what you're trying to say to that cow. If you found these mistakes educational and useful in your own cow horse, and you've thought to yourself, oh, shit, I'm making those mistakes, I'm going to fix that, and you want more information, make sure you give us a subscribe here to this channel, and we will be putting out more information to help you get better with you and your horse, and not just cow horse related. We're doing a bunch of other horsemanship and riding type things. And you can also take a look at the Cow Horse Basics book here that we have at our website for sale, and the link is down below, that you can have some notes that go along with a lot of the stuff that we talked about in this video. So make sure you give us a subscribe for more videos, take a look at that link down below, and go have some fun with your cow horse.